Welcome to How I Raised It, the podcast that goes behind the scenes with entrepreneurs who've raised capital. We uncover the tips, tricks, and techniques they use to get investors to write a check. Strap in and turn it up.
Hi, welcome to another episode of How I Raised It, produced by Foundersuite.com. Today I have Matt Pohlson of Omaze coming to us from LA. How's your day going?
It's good, Nathan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, exciting news today, which we're going to jump to. But before we get there, tell me what Omaze does.
Omaze raises money and awareness for charity by offering the chance to win once-in-a-lifetime experiences. And we've done everything from be mentored by Michelle Obama to appear in Star Wars to win a Lamborghini where Pope Francis hands you the keys. That's probably the most extraordinary experience we've ever done. I had to go to the Vatican and pitch Pope Francis. Where we're different than most companies that do this is rather than make it so one high net worth individual can pay $25,000 or $50,000 to have one of these experiences, we make it so that anybody in the world can win or get the chance to win for as little as $10. And we use best-in-class performance marketing, data science, content storytelling to drive this awareness around the world. And as a result, it nets 2 to 40x for the charity versus alternative fundraising methodologies.
So I want to get into sort of the Pope side of the market, but let's start with the charity side. So a charity will come to you, and is it usually a campaign for a specific purpose, like we need to rebuild our building or something, or kind of how's that side of the journey go?
Yeah, we tried as much as possible to do tangible projects so we can really connect our community to the impact that they've made. And it's a lot easier for someone to wrap their head around that when they can say, oh, wow, that art center or that community center in downtown Los Angeles or that ambulance exists now that didn't exist before. In terms of the projects we pick, what we call Omaze owned, which are prizes that we control and curate. So anything from winning a $250,000 McLaren to a house in Miami to a Sprinter van you can travel around the country in. And with those kind of projects, we are picking the tangible initiative based off the framework that we have for that.
Okay, go into a little more detail. So how's that work? I mean, if I have a charity that I want to come raise a big round for, how do you sort of structure it like that, or how do I?
Yeah, so we have a woman named Emily Reinstein who leads that up for us, working with a woman named Hannah Cameron, and they are essentially, we're taking inbound requests from different charity partners. We go through an evaluation where we look at first, what do we think the ripple effect that we will make, right? We have this fundamental belief that we are all in this together, that every action you take impacts some people directly, but all people indirectly. And so we really think a lot about what are the second order consequences of our impact. And so we try to assess that. We look at the tangibility of the project. So as you said, if they're having something very specific that they can build, it makes the donors feel more empowered, it makes them feel more connected. And so we look at that. We look at there's certain areas that we're particularly passionate about that we try to go deep in. We've been very focused on supporting frontline workers during COVID. We've been very focused on, helping propelling structural change in the criminal justice system to support the Black Lives Matter movement, in addition, educational opportunities and voting rights. So we have a bunch of different categories that we are focused on. So we look, does it fit one of those? And then we look, is it in a place that we're looking to expand into? So if something is in Spain or Germany, or, we're going to be doing houses in Texas, and we feel like we can come to a community beforehand and say, hey, we want to contribute first and foremost before we enter. That's how we look at those, or that's how we decide which causes to go with.
And is there a minimum amount that you need to set to be raised? I mean, or a range, or how much are companies or charities raising on this platform?
Yeah, I mean, we have raised anywhere from, on a campaign, could just net a charity as little as $25,000, or we've had other charities that have netted over $15 million. Okay,
well, all right, let's take the other side of the coin. So you get a charity on board, then how do you structure these campaigns? And of course, the real question I want to get through is how do you get Danica Patrick and Pope Francis and others to play along for these causes, because that's kind of the pretty amazing part.
Yeah. So Danica or Pope Francis or Oprah or George Clooney or whoever it is, they've got causes that they're very passionate about. And with a lot of those people, we've done, 5, 10, 15, 20 experiences. We've done probably 15 with George and 10 with Matt Damon and 20 with Kristen Bell and, a dozen with Charlize Theron. So we've got long-standing relationships because we've raised a lot more for them than they would get from alternative methods, and this talent are the busiest people in the world. Time is obviously incredibly important. Money comes and goes, time just goes. So they are really, very mindful of the efficiency of their time and the impact. And so because we've been able to deliver with, their collaboration, they continue to come back, but they come back with a charity that they are very passionate about.
Oh, so in that scenario, the charity is you're not, I guess I may have misunderstood the model. You're not getting a charity and then finding a celebrity or other, you're actually getting the supply side from the charity or from the celebrity. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, the celebrity has charities that they're passionate about, so that's why they come do it on that supply. With when it comes to the stuff Ome's owned, like the cars or the houses or erase your student debt or childcare for a year, the things that we control that don't have a celebrity involved, or at least the celebrity's not the prize, then maybe a spokesperson. That's the situation where Ome says, okay, this is a cause that we want to go to. But we start with the supply from like, what is the thing that people can win? And then we figure out the right impact partners.
Gotcha. So like the Lamborghini, was it Lamborghini or Ferrari with Pope Francis?
Lamborghini.
This is Lamborghini. So what was the cause that money went to? Yeah,
he was primarily supporting refugees and then the Neva Plains, which is this area in the Middle East where there was a lot of atrocities going on. So we trying to help essentially support this group of people. There's other causes, but that was the primary one. And so that is something that the Vatican had supported, and we have certain criteria in terms of what we support across political or religious lines, and so that was something that worked to make it that was open and accessible and met our virtues, but also supported their work.
And then let's take it through a little further. So a new charity project comes on the platform. Then what are you guys doing? I'm assuming you're putting out, amplifying it on social media, and what else? What happens after that?
Yeah, so everything with us starts with storytelling. My background before Ome's was doing cause content, so using storytelling to inspire action. And so we've done a bunch of different projects. We were the first directors, when I say we, me and my co-founder, Ryan Cummins, were the first directors on Live Earth, which was the biggest concert ever thrown, if you remember that. 7 continents in one night to raise awareness for climate change. And we had everybody from the Rolling Stones to Kanye. We did a documentary series called Girl Rising about girls' education in the developing world that was funded by Oprah and Queen Reina of Jordan. We spent a couple years traveling around the world, interviewing the world's greatest thinkers, a couple hundred Nobel Prize winners and MacArthur Genius Grant recipients. And then we did the Clinton Foundation's big 10th anniversary global television concert event. So we were doing that work and realized we were creating a lot of awareness around these projects, but not necessarily a lot of impact, right? And so that was where Ome's came from, was a response to that. But we wanted to use the power of storytelling because, the beauty of a story is it enables you to connect with someone whose experiences are different than your own. And when you do that, you want to help that person. When you do that, you feel more connected, and it's a virtuous cycle. So we start with storytelling, and also, one of our virtues is that laughter is the shortest distance between two people. And so that governs our culture, that governs the way that we do marketing. And that was something new to the charity space, right? Like if you think back 20 years ago, when you would see a video trying to get people to raise money, it was, maybe a Sally Struthers looking at these really emaciated kids, with flies on their face. And that was obviously a very noble pursuit, but, that was more about, I guess, a hand-me-down than empowerment, right? And so we try to first connect with people in a fun way and say, like, this doesn't have to be that. Like, there's giving back and putting into the community and contributing is a very human, and it releases dopamine, and it's not about guilt. And so we wanted to make it fun and funny, and then also use the talent to be fun and funny, and then communicate the gravity of what we're doing. So it starts with coming up with a funny storyline that we think can spread. And then, supercharging it with, we have an amazing performance marketing team led by a guy named Nick Marlin. And they're fantastic. And so they'll then spread it via, social, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, affiliate network, influencer network, our email team, led by them, a guy named Bill Carrasco is amazing. And, they'll spread it out. And then we get PR with people like Megan Riley and Emily that really spread this around the country.
Yeah, interesting. In a typical campaign, and there's so many, just browsing around, I'm seeing like, Camille winning the 1967 VW bus through to this Another Day at the Office, the sitcom, which looks super fun. I want that one. In a typical campaign, like how many, I guess you're calling donors or entrants are involved? How's that kind of shake out?
We'll have, on something like the Win the Sprinter van, we can have upwards of 200,000 people that are participating. So wow. It's pretty robust.
Yeah. Got it. Your favorite campaign, and we'll get into fundraising in just a second. And this is a pretty fascinating business. So what's your favorite?
My favorite campaign,
or most unusual, or most quirky. Define it how you want.
We did Ride in the Tank with Arnold Schwarzenegger and crush things. That was really fun. And we did snuggle with Jon Stewart on the last Daily Show to comfort him as he's crying, and that was really amazing because he was such an inspiration for us and his capacity for using humor to create change. So those two were awesome. Maybe the thing that was I enjoyed maybe most was at the beginning. We did play Battleship with 4-star Admiral Michael Mullen, and this girl, this woman who won, brought her 9-year-old daughter, and they got to play at the Naval Academy, and she actually beat Admiral Mullen, and that was very fun.
With the little
little battleship
flip up game, yeah, sure. How funny. And was it Arnold's tanks? Doesn't he own tanks? Was it one of?
He does. He has the tank that he drove in the Austrian army when he was 18 years old.
That's crazy.
It's amazing. I mean, it was one of the, that was one of the funnier experiences. I remember we were shooting a video to promote the tank. We basically showed what it would be like to ride in a tank with Arnold and crush things. And we like had him riding over, houses and watermelon and a copy of $1 Million Baby because it makes him cry. And we were filming the video, and we told him that, we just need you for the first half hour, and then we'll get someone to stand in to be your body double driving the tank. And so I texted the guy who was in the front with him to say, we can tell Arnold that he's good to go. And he wrote back saying, Arnold says he likes crushing things. So he just continued to drive for the next 4 hours.
Fun job you have there. Very cool. Well, that's exciting. Let's talk about fundraising a little bit. So how much have you guys raised so far, and over how many rounds?
Yeah, so as of today, we raised, obviously, as you know, we announced a $30 million raise, and we had raised 30 before that. So that brings us up to 60, and that has been done over 4 rounds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I see you guys have been around a while. If I'm looking at PitchBook, if this is accurate, about 2012-ish was the start, somewhere around there.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Was the concept like remarkably different back then, or maybe let's go to some of those earlier rounds? What were you pitching, and what were you sort of raising on?
Yeah, just, the concept is in some ways incredibly similar to the beginning, which doesn't happen that much, and I don't necessarily recommend that, but has also evolved a lot in the last 2 years. And so, the evolution really went from doing strictly talent to evolving into new areas. I had this crazy life-changing experience 2 years ago where they declared me dead, and then they brought me back to life. I flatlined for 4.5 minutes, and when I left the hospital, the doctor said, this is the most extraordinary case I've ever seen. We had you at 0% chance of survival for 2 days, and we have no medical explanation. And when I asked, well, like, what, do you have a guess of how you saved me? He said it was love and it was optimism that brought you back. And I really believe that, and you come back from something like that, and you want to make sure you put as much love and optimism back on the earth as you can, because I felt like that really saved me, and I could feel it when I was going through this experience. And so that helped spur a whole new direction where we had, instead of just doing talent, we realized, we can do so much more if we start to expand into other categories. And so we had done a campaign with Daniel Craig where you got to go to the Aston Martin track with him and ride around in a one-of-a-kind Aston Martin. Then you got to keep the Aston Martin. It was supposed to raise $300,000, and it raised $2.1 million.
Wow.
And so we said, wow, that's pretty credible. Let's try that with a car without, with just Ome's distribution. And it did really, really well. So we've really scaled that out. So now we're fundraising off the scalability based off doing cars and erase your student debt and houses and expanding this internationally. And so it's the business is supercharged over the last 2 years, especially during COVID. But in our earlier days, we had to go through a lot of rounds where that was not the case, where we were still burning a lot of money, where, the celebrity stuff was working and getting a lot of attention, but there was obviously perpetual questions about its scalability, and rightly so. Yeah. And so, a lot of times at the beginning, when you're fundraising, you're really asking someone to take a bet on you and the strength of your dream and your capacity to evolve your narrative. And so I think people saw that there was some magic in Ome's, but they also saw that we hadn't figured out what exactly that was and what that looked like at scale. Yeah. And so that, that created challenges that we had to work through. And, I think at the end of the day, fundraising above anything else is about persistence.
Sure. So something you just said 10 seconds ago, kind of in the early days, people are betting on you. We share a common investor, FFVC.
Yeah.
Those guys. Yeah. They led our seed round, and same. I just love those guys because I feel like they took I don't want to say gamble, but they took a educated bet on Foundersuite, kind of on a, strength of conviction and persistence, and not really much to show for it in terms of like product and traction at that point. So I love those guys. So good for you.
Yeah, they're great. BJ and John are awesome.
Yeah, we'll plug them in here. Very interesting, very interesting. And one thing I didn't touch on, jumping around just a tiny bit, actually two questions, totally unrelated. What's the revenue model? I assume you're just taking a percent of the amount raised, and then how did you die for 4.5 minutes? Unrelated questions, but yeah.
Before. The revenue model, yes, we take a percentage of the proceeds. And so the way that works, we have kind of two areas that work. So on the talent side, basically 60% of the gross goes to the talent's charity. We typically spend 25% on marketing to drive the fundraising, and then we'll typically net 15% on that. So on $1 million campaign, say 600,000 goes to a charity, 250,000 goes to content marketing, refunds everything, and then Ome's nets 150,000. On the owned side of the business, it's different. So because we're taking all the risk, we're securing the prizes, there's no talent involved. So, typically when we initially started, would say on a $1 million campaign, say we were doing a Lamborghini or some really expensive car, if you combine the cost of the prize plus the cost of all the marketing, which was more expensive because there wasn't, we couldn't leverage the talent reach, we'd spend of the $1 million, about $700,000 on all the marketing and pricing, right? And then 50, we guarantee to the charity, all right, you'll get half of the rest of that, which is 15%. We'll take what's left over. If it costs more than that, then we'll lose a little bit. If it's better, then we do better. And now as we've gotten more efficient, a lot of that value accrues back to us, which our charity partners are totally fine with, because we're driving, if you just look at the net for their ROI, right? Like they don't have to do anything. We just send them checks and they're getting significant funds that is really game changing for them, especially in these times.
But they're not getting paid themselves. It's all going into their charity, right?
From the talent side, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, always to the charity. Yeah, 100% to the charity.
And completely unrelated, but how did you die for 4.5 minutes?
There's not like a short version of the story, but I'll attempt it. Basically, when I was born, I was supposed to die. My stomach was twisted in a knot, and they did this crazy surgery. And the scar tissue from that surgery broke off all these years later and created a bowel obstruction. And I went to the hospital and they couldn't figure out what was going on. And our COO, Helen, came, and my parents came, and they did all these tests and they sent them home. So we're going to keep Matt overnight. And if we can't, if he's not better by the morning, we'll do surgery then. And then our COO, Helen, drives home to her house and just feels like something's telling her to go back to the hospital. So she drives back at like midnight, and she's British and a COO. She's not like a Venice, listen to the cosmos type person. So it was a very character. But if she hadn't driven back, I would have died like 45 minutes later because my blood pressure had plummeted. And so then, when I came out they had rushed me down to surgery, came out of surgery, and they said to my mom, the good news is we figured out what it is. It's a bowel obstruction. Bad news is he's in critical condition, and then we don't know why. And then there's, to try to truncate the story, there's a lot that went on, but basically after my mom came back upstairs from getting my brother, I was flatlined, and she heard it over the loudspeaker, code blue in room 437. My mom burst into the room while I was flatlining and basically coached me back to life as they were doing the electric shocks and the compressions. And I flatlined for 4.5 minutes, which is a really long time. And, and only because she coached me back and these other people in the room fought so hard and people sent me love and optimism was I able to make it.
Does it, ask this. We're going to get back to the fundraising, but I just have to ask one more question about that. Does that put everything else in perspective in your life after going through that experience? It seems like it would, like, almost,
oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was so much more ego driven than I realized before that, and not in a, like, I don't think people would have necessarily characterized me as like egotistical or, an arrogant person, but I cared a lot about what people thought about me. I compared myself to other people, specifically other entrepreneurs that were friends of mine that I perceived to be much more successful than me. I used to say stuff to myself that was just, if someone else said to me, I probably wouldn't be friends with that person, so it helped me to be a best friend to myself, which I think is really critical on the entrepreneurial journey, right? Because there's so much ups and downs, and sometimes you're so alone, especially when you're a founder. I was, I kind of had my whole identity wrapped up in that, and my whole ego wrapped up in that. And so as a result, I'm just as passionate about what we do. I work probably even harder than I did before. But also it's transcended being about me. It's much more about like what our purpose and mission, which I always think was obviously at the core of it, but it just is, I don't know, it just enabled me to not be so ego driven.
Sure.
You get out of your way and you spread more love, you spread more optimism, because the opposite of love isn't hate, it's fear. And I have a lot of fear. And this helped me, everything. My buddy, Walter Jiver, is the CEO of a company called Scopely. He shared this quote with me that said, everything you want is on the other side of fear. And I really believe that. And so it's just helped me, get to
that's good.
more.
I like it. Talk about putting together, you've got a couple rounds under you, and this most recent one, we could go either chronologically or backwards. What was the hardest round to put together? Your business is really cool. It's a little bit sort of out there, like a little different. I guess you've had some precedents with Kickstarter and GoFundMe and kind of other for-profit, capital raising platforms that have kind of gone before. Was it hard to raise money for this startup?
Yeah, it was. This last round is the only one that I would say was a pretty simple process until the pandemic broke, I guess. But
yeah.
Pandemic aside, because we didn't close. We were supposed to close on March 13th, but we can save that story. In terms of, the early years, it was really hard. One, I had no track record. I'd only been filmmaking and then business school, but I had never even had a real job. My co-founder was the same story. Two, there was no comps, right? No one can look at this and be like, oh, okay, reminds me of this other business that sold to them for, $300 million. So this makes sense to me. Like, there was just no way to compare it.
Yeah.
Three, we were giving away the majority of our money to charity, which we were told by several VCs at the beginning, you'll never raise a venture dollar with this kind of model.
Sure.
So the combination of those two things, and I guess the fourth thing was like, I had no idea what I was doing. And so that combo made it really challenging, and I mean, we were about to close our first round, and then like our main investor that was kind of the linchpin that everyone had kind of fallen in and like pulled out like 2 days before, and like we had to fly out to where he was and get him back in, and that's just like persistence.
What made him get cold feet, and what'd you do to wrangle him back in? Any stories there?
What made him get cold feet? I think that's maybe factors outside of us. Like, we hadn't really launched it, so there wasn't like, it's not like we had bad traction or anything like that. Because nothing like that had changed. I just think, you're always in danger of losing it until the money's in the bank, especially in like the seed stages. And
totally,
that was a different fundraising climate than today. Also, today's a much more friendly fundraising climate. But so I think there was just potentially competing things for their capital, and and his partner maybe was not as excited about it as he was. And so it just wasn't worth the persuasion. So to get him back, we used some basic kind of like negotiation and influence principles, which were one precedent, right? Like you had said these things, you had made this deal, people care, like you invoked the word fair in people. And that actually is a really powerful, influential thing. There's a book that has been really helpful called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, which is this, FBI negotiator who's one of the best selling negotiations book of all time. He got a lot of his principles from Cialdini's Influence the Psychology of Persuasion. So Voss's book hadn't come out at that time, but we'd used Cialdini. So a lot of that stuff, but then also, we spelled out the dream, I mean, everybody like wants to dream. And we said to him, like, look, we understand that we were talking like $50,000, like, look, your $50,000 may seem like a lot right now. And we understand that like we're riskier than most, given that we don't have a track record, we haven't even launched. And there's a lot to overcome. At the same time, like this could be something, and I know you believe this, it is truly world changing. Like this could be something that has never been done before. This could be something that really like has a like generational ripple effect. And like how many times do you get a chance to invest in something like that? And that we are going to put everything on the line. Like you can see that in our eyes. That's why you agreed to invest in the first place. And, do you think that has changed? And he said, no, that's changed. I said, then, well, take this bet because this money means nothing to you. And it means everything to us.
Yeah. Interesting. Cool. Very cool.
Triple cool.
Any tactics you used? I see some LA investors on there. Some, I think I saw Paige Craig and a few others.
LA investor.
Any tactics for kind of putting together this target list? You have some pretty good investors on there, FirstMark and a few others. How'd you kind of assemble the round?
I mean, do you mean the most recent round or
we can go. Yeah, let's go. Let's touch on the most recent round since it's so timely. Why don't you talk about putting that together and how you targeted the right investors and any process you ran there?
Yeah, I mean, so I think we started with what is this money used for, right? For our own purposes, like why? Like, I think often people look at fundraising as like a rite of passage or some kind of milestone, and we actually don't. Like we want to avoid fundraising at all costs. Again, like unless you have an amazing reason to do it, sometimes you have no choice but to do it. In this situation, we had more of a choice than we've had in the past. So we really looked back and said, okay, what can this money do for us? What can this, and what ways specifically can this help us? And, strategically, where are the areas for us? It's international expansion. It's expanding into new categories with cars and houses. It's being able to really build out from a brand perspective and someone who can help with the partnerships that can get integrated in. So we looked at those things and we said, okay, and who's our wish list on that? And then, FirstMark led the round. They've been in before with us. And that was a choice. But Rick Heitzman there has just been an amazing partner. And they've been, just with us through thick and thin and have so much, track record in scaling businesses from this point to, massive exits from Shopify to StubHub to Riot Games to DraftKings to Airbnb, Pinterest. So that was, we thought they were a good lead. And then when we looked at, Wick Grossbook and Causeway Media, they're really strategic for us in the house space in terms of integrating with sports teams. He's the owner of the Celtics, the lead owner of the Celtics on the NBA executive committee, super smart guy, highly connected, really respected philanthropist. Tusk Ventures is really helpful for us on the regulatory side. We're really excited to have them involved. And so you just go down the list and it's really like, okay, who are the people we want to work with and how do they strategically help? We always save some space for just like general kind of athletes, Penni, Thow and Copper's amazing across a bunch of different dimensions. We brought her on. Then we also looked at diversity too. Like we didn't have enough diversity on our cap table going into this round and we wanted to really improve that. And that was before everything that happened and obviously has only got more important.
What did you do to improve, diversity? Because that's obviously topical, as you just mentioned, but it's I think there's not a clear playbook for that when raising money necessarily. So,
yeah, I mean, I think there is not a clear playbook, but I think if you spend a little bit of time on it, it's just a matter of saying it matters, and that we were in a great place where we were, significantly oversubscribed, and we set aside, so we want at least X amount of dollars to come from, a more inclusive group of investors. And we sought those people out. And we were able to get them in.
But
and not just because
there are a lot of there are a handful of kind of female-led funds and female-focused funds. There are a handful of Black venture. There aren't that many out there. So how do you sort of identify the right investors?
Yeah, but it doesn't just need to be venture. That's not the whole world of fundraising now.
Yeah.
People over-index towards venture. And so there's angel networks that are like Gaingels that are really focused on inclusivity. We, as I mentioned, Penni, Thow, and Copper Group are like just highly networked. We brought in other people. We talked to our investors and our angel investors and said, hey, like, we're trying to expand in this way. Who do you think would be good? And we ended up with, a really diverse in round. And again, we didn't need just, once you get those two big checks, which usually obviously come from venture, then there's room for a lot of other people in there.
Cool. Interesting. Good. All right. Well, I won't keep you too much longer, but any other tips, words of advice for founders, kind of hoping to follow in your general footsteps, or anything you would tell I was asked this question, anything you would tell your younger self if you were doing this all over again?
Yeah. What I would say to my younger self is be a best friend to yourself. I think that's good advice for founders in general. We can be pretty hard on ourselves by nature. And some people think that's the self-criticism is what motivates me and gets me to do it. And try a little bit, take a walk without it and see I bet you might still have the motivation. I thought that was the case, and that didn't prove to be the case. More tactically, this is all about, especially in the early days of fundraising, all about storytelling. Really tell a story with your presentation, really take them on the journey, help them feel your passion. Don't be afraid to take them through, spend some more time on that versus just CAC. Obviously those things are critical, and especially as you get to growth stages, it's not like something you can go away from, but humans make decisions emotionally before they make them logically. Even the most, if you're sitting down with Sequoia or Kleiner or whatever, people would probably scoff at that, but they still are human beings. And so especially in the early seed stages, understanding the narrative, the why, what you think you could be, being able to paint that out. They also recognize that good storytellers will be good at BD, they'll be good at partnerships, they'll be good at hiring. And so, showing that skill is actually really, really valuable. And having a deck that follows that arc of the story and really plan that out and take the time in the performance elements of that. No matter how good your product is or your traction, that's always going to be helpful. And if it's not that good yet, or you don't have any traction, it's even more important.
You were already a storyteller from your previous work. Any ways to help cultivate that? I don't think it always comes natural to people, right?
Absolutely. Anyone can learn it. There's a formula. Storytelling is actually very mathematical. If you look at movies, the way they're structured, you have the same, the inciting incident always happens on page 10. The point of no return always happens on page 45. It's very formulaic. Even innovative movies like Memento or whatever, it's the same formula. Music is also mathematically structured, and it's a story. So there's a book called Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller that really helps articulate the evolutionary biology that actually is the reason why storytelling is so important. How you can address limbic responses of people, how you can meet needs of theirs around survival or connection or acceptance, and why stories do that. It can be, that's a good book. Story by Robert McKee is more general about just how you actually write scripts, but that can be, if you have any interest in that, there's a lot of overlap. And then there's a woman named Nancy Duarte, I forget.
Duarte, I think, yeah.
Yeah, she's the guru of presentations, and she talks about storytelling. One of the great pieces of advice I always got on that, we did a project with Bill Clinton, And he's, I think he's a very good speaker. And I said, what's the best piece of advice you have around public speaking? He's like, make it about them. Whenever I've made it about me, I always fail. Whenever I make it about them, I succeed. And he goes, and that applies to most things in life. And so when you're telling the story, like, it's as much as you can make it apply to the person who's sitting on the other side of the table, take them through, connect them in, that's really powerful.
Yeah. Good stuff. All right. Good stuff. Congrats on the new round. Onward and upward. I'll be curious to see what directions you guys expand into with this new fresh capital. You have already done some crazy things. I love the Arnold driving the tank story. So we'll see where this takes you. All right. Thanks so much, Matt. Appreciate it. And we'll catch you after your, Series D round, or after you go public. How about that?
Perfect.
All right.
All right. Take care.